Bonnie and Clyde. Hey, we're gonna get into this shit, bro. What time it is? 9:21. All right, bet. Man, I'm thinking Shawty was bad, bro. Man, she ain't even all that though.
She was a lonely waitress longing for excitement and romance. He was a volatile ex-con who vowed he would never.
That nigga was a Damon. Hey, I can just tell by this picture right here. Hey,
Go back to prison. They found each other in the slums of Dallas, Texas in the early 1930s and proceeded to go on a crime spree that shocked the nation. Fueled by passionate love, the desire to escape poverty, and utter contempt for authority, Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow united.
damn.
It was love at first sight then, because they never did, want anybody else but each other.
Bonnie joined Clyde and stayed with him because she knew he was going to die and she wanted to die by his side.
Damn. What the fuck was
Since their
this?
death 60 years ago, the lives of Bonnie and Clyde have been romanticized and glamorized in films, in books, in music,
They died in that car?
television. Love and Death, the story of Bonnie and Clyde. For 2 incredible years, Bonnie and Clyde led their notorious gang on a bloody crime wave that stretched across 5 states. Bonnie and Clyde robbed banks, pulled a string of armed robberies, and left a bloody trail of murder victims in their wake. All the
Dang,
while,
she was like
hundreds
that.
of law enforcement personnel from 5 southwestern states hotly pursued the couple.
Louise. Oh, for real? Damn. We got Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma. I think this is Arkansas, and it's Missouri right here.
Yet the pair was able to elude authorities and avoid capture until they were taken
was
out
that?
in a hail of bullets.
Cops hate cop killers, and they were not popular. They were highly sought, and
They was killing
everybody wanted
cops?
a piece of Bonnie and Clyde.
Hey, you know you're not actually allowed to drink.
Damn, I ain't seen Post Malone guys in so long, but
Since when?
hey, if y'all think about it, but these two really, but this store really is GTA 6. This store is GTA 6, bro. Jason and Lucia, bro. I gotta think about it, bro. For
No
those who
man
tapped
but
in
the
for real.
Undertaker will ever get me. If officers cripple me to where I see they'll take
This
me
really what it
alive,
is.
I'll take my own life. Clyde Barrow.
What? Wait, what?
I'll take my. If officers cripple me to where I see they'll take me alive, I'll take my own life. Clyde Barrow.
He was going out like that?
A tough man who lived in tough times. Clyde Barrow was born in Tellico, Texas on March 21st, 1909.
Damn.
He was the 6th child of Henry and Cumie Barrow.
6th child?
He was a wonderful boy.
Nah, I'm here real, nigga.
He loved his mother better than anything in the world, I guess. He was quite a mama's boy, and he was real close to all of us.
There was plenty of love in the Barrow family, but very little money. Henry Barrow was a poor tenant farmer. When Clyde was 12 years old, the family was forced to give up farming. They moved to Dallas, Texas.
There was a lot of economic prosperity, but there was just as much economic despair in the 20s, especially in the rural areas. That's where Clyde Barrow came from. He was from a rural farming background. I think it was as early as 1919 or 1920 when the Barrows moved to Dallas. Dallas was somewhat of a mecca for rural farmers who were having trouble making ends meet in their farming profession.
When I grew up with my brother, it
My
was
brother.
a very nice place where we grew
Very
up.
nice.
We lived on a campground. We was real poor and didn't have no money, no home or nothing. And finally, my sister bought a place up on Eagle Ford Road, they call it, and my daddy had built this little house that we moved in, there, and we drug it up there on this place, and he put in a filling station.
By age 16, Clyde had quit school. He was
Damn.
slender and small in stature, barely 5'7", and possessed an innocent look.
So he was a. So y'all let this short ass nigga go around robbing niggas.
Following the example of his older brother, Buck, Clyde embarked on a life of crime. It started with small transgressions.
He rented this car, and he kept this car too long, and the police come looking for him. And that started it first. And then
shit.
I think my brother Buck and him bought some turkeys from somebody, and these turkeys was hot, and they caught them trying to sell these turkeys, and then they put them in jail for hot turkeys.
Niggas went to jail for selling turkeys? Wait, what?
Buck spent a week in prison, but authorities chose not to incarcerate Clyde. However, this first brush with the law did not deter Clyde. He continued his petty thievery. He also started stealing cars. Clyde quickly became well known to the Dallas police. In October of 1929, police were searching for Clyde in connection with a number of local robberies. He was trying to elude police and was in hiding when he met the woman who would become his soulmate, Bonnie Parker.
Ah, shit. How they met?
Bonnie Parker was born on October 1st in 1910.
Oh, shit.
She had an older brother and a younger sister.
Okay.
Her father, Henry, died when Bonnie was just 4 years old. Her mother, Emma, then moved the family to a suburb of Dallas, known as Cement City.
So, yo, dumbass. See, bro. History always repeats itself, bro. Shawty, your ass stayed in the suburbs and your ass chose a nigga in the hood. Just like now, bro. These good girls love a hood nigga, bro, who ain't gonna do shit for them. Man, hey, bro. That shit is crazy, bro.
There was a lot of poverty in West Dallas. There were
On me, bro. They get excited for them drill, but trying to live their life.
A lot of energy that they had no place to blow off steam. They saw things that they wanted that they couldn't get, and they just started taking it. And so in that environment, that's where Bonnie came from, really.
Okay.
Bonnie's family managed to get her through high school, and she seems to have been, by all the reports, a rather nice girl, attractive.
See what I
girl.
just told
She worked
y'all.
as a waitress. She was married when she was very young, but her husband was convicted and sent to prison before she barely met Clyde.
Man, but she wasn't a nigga who dropped out of
She was 16.
Man.
She and Roy apparently.
Imagine if Clyde had a switch on his. Hey,
he was
hey, boy, if Clyde had a switch, boy, that nigga would be a dangerous nigga, boy. That nigga would, hey,
to her.
Probably be alive to this day.
He drank heavily. He would take to disappearing for weeks at a time. After several of his disappearances, when he showed up again, she told him just to shove off. She didn't want anything to do with him. But she never divorced him, and she always wore his wedding ring, and she still had it on the day she was killed.
Roy Thornton was arrested and convicted of bank robbery. He was sent to the notorious Eastham prison farm. In January 1930, Bonnie Parker met another dangerous man who would be her true love and her undoing.
So she always like the dangerous ass niggas. Hey, I love them dangerous niggas.
Work smarter, launch faster.
Nah, I tell you, bro. History always repeats itself, bro.
It's on Beehive.
Hey, I love them dangerous ass niggas.
I think he came along at just the right time for her. She was looking for a wild card like Clyde Barrow, and she sure found him.
Clyde was 20 years old, Bonnie just 19. Their first encounter took place when Bonnie came to the aid of a sick girlfriend.
Okay. Bro, y'all gotta think, bro, back then, bro, 20 and 19, bro, that was grown as fuck. Like 20 and 19 back then was like being down there 28, 29, my nigga. You was grown as fuck at that age back then, my nigga.
Bonnie
Nowadays you can like look here, this shit off.
She was a kind person. We had a good friend and she had an accident. Bonnie wasn't working at the time, so she went out to take care of the lady. And she met Clyde through this lady. Bonnie's sister, Billie Jean Parker, 1968.
Billie Jean!
He was already wanted for several burglaries at the time. He was hiding at the time. And he and Bonnie really fell for each other immediately. And
This nigga had several murders at
were almost
20?
always together for the next 2 weeks until
Oh,
he was
me not in
finally
love with
arrested.
Clyde was convicted and sentenced to 2 years for 5 auto thefts and received a 12-year suspended sentence for 2 burglaries. But once imprisoned, Clyde's thoughts immediately turned to escape. Lovesick, Bonnie was more than willing to help him.
Bonnie Parker smoked it in a 32 Colt automatic. He managed to escape and he left the state, but within a couple weeks he was recaptured up in
Hey, I ain't gonna lie, bitch. I need me a bit like Bonnie, bitch. I ain't gonna lie. This bitch snuck an automatic weapon in jail for this nigga to escape. But that ain't real right there, but she risked her, risked her freedom for this nigga, bro. That's actually crazy.
Minnesota.
A
He was
weapon,
brought
nigga?
back, tried,
An automatic at that?
14-year sentence.
Clyde was remanded to Huntsville Penitentiary, where he met fellow inmate Ralph Foltz. The pair formed an immediate alliance. The men were then allocated to work in Eastham Prison Farm.
At Eastham, it was like going to another planet, really. Especially for somebody like Barrow. As much as he'd been involved in, he wasn't expecting what he had found down in Eastham.
Okay.
Prisoners were regularly beaten and abused. Guards allegedly routinely shot and killed convicts to keep the other inmates in line.
Damn.
Soon Foltz found himself on the receiving end of a guard beating. They were exacting revenge on Foltz, who had previously escaped from Eastham and was later recaptured.
It was just kind of a tradition, and Foltz knew it was coming. 2 guards closed in and held him down while they were pistol whipping him.
Oh, hell nah.
At one point, the guard that was beating him stopped, and Foltz was almost unconscious. He could barely see, and he could see Clyde standing over there with his fists clenched like he was going to jump on this guard. His guards were like 6'3", 6'4", and here's a little 5'7", 120-pound Clyde standing over like he's... And Ralph said he could still see the veins in his neck just bulging out. Like he was going to jump on that guard, and that guard said, "What do you want, boy? You want some of this too?" And Clyde never said a thing. He just stood there. And all of that called attention away from what they were doing with Foltz. And later on, Foltz thought that he may have saved his life by standing there like that.
Damn.
And they stopped beating Foltz, and they left him there. And they went off, and Clyde never backed down. And this really impressed Ralph Foltz. And right after that, Clyde said, "You know what we ought to do? We ought to get out of this place, get a gang up, come back in here, raid this place, and turn everybody loose."
But that nigga Clyde was on some high shit, man. But that nigga was the man with the master plan, but that nigga was a problem, but imagine Clyde today, but in society, but that nigga would be a serious problem, bro.
Every damn one of these guards.
Excuse
Nigga
me.
finna break, bro.
Is that you for those
I want to know
requests?
if
Well, we're kind of high level.
that plan actually worked.
This was more than just big talk from Clyde. It would only take 3 years before Clyde was able to put his plan for revenge into action. Meanwhile, Clyde's relationship with Bonnie intensified as the pair regularly corresponded through letters.
Sugar, I never really knew I really cared for you until you got in jail. And honey, if you get out okay, please don't ever do anything to get locked up again. I can't think of anything to say.
Yeah, they got her notes and
Only
shit.
that I love you more than anything on earth. Excerpt of a letter from Bonnie to Clyde, February 14, 19...
Valentine's Day.
Dear baby, I just read your letter, and I was sure glad to get it, for I'm awfully lonesome and blue. Honey, if I could just spend just 1 week with you, I'd be ready to die, for I love you. Excerpt of a letter from Clyde to Bonnie, April 19th, 1930.
The only thing he would ever say to my mother, it was a burning hell. It was horrible on my mother. She like to went crazy because that's one thing. Her kids come first with her, and it almost drove her crazy.
Mother went down to Waco to talk to the judge, and he said he'd help her get my sentence cut back 2 years. If everything works out like I hope it will, I won't have to stay away from my baby much longer. Merry, Merry Christmas. I send all my love to you. Excerpt of a letter from Clyde to Bonnie, December 21st, 1930.
What was in that pan?
14 months later, Clyde was still at the gruesome prison farm. He was growing impatient, waiting for his mother to convince authorities to give her son an early release. So Clyde decided to take matters into his own hands.
One day he convinced a fellow convict to lob off a couple of toes so that he could get out of work detail. The funny thing about it is his mother and sister were at the governor working on his pardon, and 2 weeks later he was pardoned and walked out of Easton Prison on crutches.
Damn.
In February 1932, Clyde came home to Dallas. Prison life had had a devastating effect on him.
I think it changed him a lot, made him hard. He used to talk a lot, and he was a lot of fun. He liked to dance, and he played all kinds of instruments nearly, and they'd done a lot to Clyde down there. It was just really a living hell for him.
Jail changed that nigga.
Clyde faced an almost insurmountable struggle when he returned home.
He served his time. He came out. Clyde started to work. At that time, it was during the Depression. And each time that something happened, the police went to Clyde's job. Well, after so many times on the job questioned him, he would lose that job time after time.
Damn.
And jobs were scarce. Clyde just finally gave up.
Hey.
Billie Jean.
Hey, Missy, y'all can't say he ain't try to get a regular job, bro. Y'all can't say, bro, like nigga when they crashed out, bro. Hey, but he tried, but feds was on his ass, bro.
Parker, 1968.
While not everyone chose a life of crime, the Great Depression drove many people to acts of desperation.
Prosperity is just around the corner, say the hopeful headlines. But around the corners wind the lengthening bread lines, and a whole new class of citizens appears in American society. The new poor.
The country had been racked by its worst economic decline. A quarter of the population was unemployed. People were on the road. Hobos were jumping trains. Dislocation was going on everywhere.
You had great disparities between wealth and poverty. A lot of farmers were losing their farms. There was a lot of resentment against banks and big business and the railroads and other heavy industry at this time.
The Great Depression. The time seemed to fill the air with a heavy apathy, born of frustration, helplessness, and suppressed anger.
Damn.
In many ways, Bonnie and Clyde were a product of those desperate, dreary times, and the public responded.
I think many people had the idea that Bonnie and Clyde were doing something that they would have liked to have done at times. And anybody who robbed banks or fought the law was really living out some secret fantasies on the part of a large part of the population of the country.
Facts. Nobody ugly as hell.
The Depression gave rise to a new class of criminal. While organized crime syndicates led by men like Al Capone prospered in the Prohibition-era 20s,
during his time.
During the Depression, a new breed of criminal was born.
In a way, Clyde Barrow and other outlaws from the Midwest and the Southwest represented a certain kind of Robin Hood ethic attacking some of these institutions.
At the same time that Bonnie and Clyde were active, we had John.
That was pricing on this nigga?
Much more famous outlaw in his time. Pretty Boy Floyd, Ma Barker and her boys, Machine Gun Kelly, Babyface Nelson, a whole raft.
Wait, so Machine Gun Killer was actually a real person? That's where MGK got his name from? Hold on. Hey, next straight, I might gotta watch something about that nigga, bro.
After these people.
I didn't know that was actually a real person.
Country.
The Depression sparked the public's fascination with bad guys, in real life and in the movies. Actors like Edward G. Robinson and James Cagney gave crime a lot of class. Gangster films became so popular that government officials became alarmed. This is one of the reasons the Hayes Office, Hollywood's self-censorship board, was born.
That would mean a gangster was
Yet
something.
for all their infamy, Bonnie and Clyde were not very efficient thieves.
Bonnie and Clyde never seemed to plan. They were predatory robbers that simply moved about the countryside, and when they ran out of money, they robbed whatever was convenient. This meant...
Looking to get up to $750? Then BioLife is looking for you. Because at
that they usually took very little money, and they were risking their lives sometimes for $10, $20, $50.
You robbed a nigga for $10? $10? But nah, I gotta think back then, bro. 10 was a lot probably back then. I ain't gonna lie.
$2,000 was a huge haul for them.
After playing Red Dead, but hey, but $10 is a lot.
But it wasn't so much the money. Clyde fancied himself a modern-day Jesse James.
Yeah, 10 was like 100.
I'm sure Clyde Barrow did think of himself as a modern-day Jesse James. Instead of a fast getaway into the rural hinterland on a horse, he used a car. And in many ways, his crimes were similar. He tried to avoid killing any innocent victims. He shot mostly lawmen, and very often even with lawmen, he would capture, take for a ride, and then release unharmed, adding certain kind of romantic panache to his crimes.
The public's fascination with both fictional gangsters and the genuine article was spurred by the emptiness of the Depression years. But Bonnie and Clyde were truly unique. The couple's passionate love affair put them in a class by themselves.
Okay.
The
only couple to do it.
Clyde is an irresistible one. It's the stuff of legend. Attractive young people, totally nihilistic, totally without fear, totally antisocial, breaking all the rules, all the conventions, defying all the forces of authority. And on numerous occasions, they showed that they were willing to risk their lives for each other.
I know you can't ever live in Dallas, honey, because you can't live down the awful name you got here. But sugar, you could go somewhere else and get a job and work.
Damn, they don't leave each other by this point.
To be a man,
they don't stay with each other by this point.
Thug. I know you are good, and I know you can make good. Excerpt of a letter from Bonnie to Clyde.
But Clyde did not heed Bonnie's advice. Now an ex-con, the police continued to routinely bring Clyde in for questioning. It took just 2 weeks to end Clyde's half-hearted attempt to go straight.
They was trying to make his ass an informant.
It was hard enough for anybody to make an honest living back then, much less somebody who had been in jail. And once a person had been in jail, it was real tough to go out and get honest work.
When they started picking him up, and he just thought, well, I'm not going back to that prison. I'll just start a life of crime, I guess.
In March of 1932, traveling in a stolen car, Bonnie and Clyde went on the road together for the first time. Ralph Fultz joined them for the trip. Fultz discussed the couple's attitude in this interview he gave in 1984, 2 years before his death.
Damn.
And it was a game then, but it got serious, you know, after I got with them. It's hard to turn around when you go snowballing, you know.
Bonnie participated in her first robbery with Clyde and his partner at that time, Ralph Fultz. in April of 1932. The robbery evidently was badly botched, and in an escape attempt, Bonnie was captured by the police.
Damn, this bitch stupid.
Bonnie and Ralph were captured. Bonnie cooled her heels in a jail cell in Kaufman, Texas for 2 months. Ralph Fultz was sent back to the penitentiary. Clyde escaped.
Pacers choked? Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Hey, man, W Oklahoma, though, man. Shit, hey. I guess, bruh. Damn, Halliburton, bruh. That nigga Halliburton would have clutched it. Bruh, Halliburton would have clutched it, bro. That nigga known for clutch moments, bro. That nigga Halliburton is known for clutch moments, bro. Bro, listen, bro. If that nigga wasn't hurt, bro. If Halliburton wasn't hurt, bro. That nigga would have won the finals, bro. I'm saying it now, bro. If Tyrese Halliburton didn't get hurt, bro, he would have won the finals for the Pacers, my nigga.
I knew Clyde wasn't gonna give up. He done showed me that he wasn't about to give up, and I knew Bonnie would be with him, man.
While Bonnie was in jail, Clyde kept
I don't even want to go on the group chat, bro.
He teamed up with another prison pal, Raymond Hamilton. The pair decided to rob John Butcher, a shopkeeper in Hillsborough, Texas. But the heist did not go as planned. This documentary, filmed in 1934, shows a reenactment of the crime.
And about midnight on April 30th, 1932, they knocked on the door of a small store owned by J.N. Boucher. Clyde Barrow murdered J.N. Boucher, a defenseless man, shot him in the back, and then continued to pour hot lead into his body as it lay on the floor.
Damn!
At that point in time, Clyde could have turned back, because even though Mrs. Butcher identified them as the two bandits, it was circumstantial evidence, so they could have turned back. But Clyde felt like that he was caught. At that time period, they gave you the electric chair.
Oh!
He knew he was facing the death sentence, and he just kept on at it.
In June 1932, Bonnie was acquitted for lack of evidence and released from jail. She quickly rejoined her lover. But Clyde now had a price on his head. The governor of Texas had offered a $250 reward for his capture. Clyde Barrow.
$250?
Front page news. And the headlines turned.
This was a real deal, Red Dead.
Clyde and Ray Hamilton were hiding out in Stringtown, Oklahoma, after robbing a packing company payroll. On the night of August 5th, 1932, at a country dance, the fugitives senselessly killed Deputy Eugene Moore and seriously wounded Sheriff C.G. Maxwell.
A sheriff?
Clyde and Hamilton and two others had come to the dance, probably looking for somebody to rob. They were liquored up. Two officers walked over to them. One of them said, "We don't allow that here." Prohibition was still going on.
Predator killer of killers.
Damn, there's too many ads in this shit, but they're trying to get paid.
And is now certified.
I don't blame them though.
And suddenly he was killed. And his associate mortally wounded. And the outlaws.
They killed a nigga because he couldn't drink alcohol?
They didn't make it very far down the road after the big exchange of gunfire before they overturned the car in a culvert. They unloaded a lot of their guns and run across a railroad track and managed to steal another car. And in the total of all, they abandoned 3 cars and finally escaped on foot. And that really was the end of it. As far as it was concerned, Clyde was a hunted man.
Yeah, so he was on the run for most of his life.
Bonnie and Clyde survived 22 more months after the Stringtown murders, but life on the run was far from glamorous.
they certainly were not living well. They were camping out. They were living in third-rate tourist camps, and I'm sure they were paying bribes in some cases or outrageous sums of money to people to hide them in other cases. They needed money, and they did perform more robberies to get it.
For the families of Bonnie and Clyde, these were tough times. But the two outlaws tried to keep in touch with their concerned relatives.
Mama used to write it down on the side of the wall what time when he come by and all. December, January, February, March, at least 10 or 12 times each one of them months, he'd come by home.
The outlaws had a unique way of setting up meetings with their families. Clyde would put a note in a cola bottle and toss the bottle from the car as he passed by his father's filling station. Henry Barrow would retrieve
smart,
and the rendezvous was set.
We went every time that he'd come to town. My mother'd cook him some beans or something. We'd take him something to eat, clean clothes to him.
We usually met them in a field, and we had a signal. Just turn the lights on and off so many times, and they know it was us, and we know it was them. Billie Jean Parker, 1968.
My mother wasn't mad at him. She just, she tried to get him to not do things, but he just said he done got in too deep and he couldn't get out of it.
Raymond Hamilton was also close to his relatives, but during a family visit in Michigan, Ray was apprehended and was sentenced to 264 years in Eastham Prison Farm.
Damn!
Clyde vowed to get Ray out. By this time, the Barrow Gang had already established a reputation of dubious distinction in the Southwest. But the path to nationwide infamy began in late March of 1933 when Buck Barrow was released from prison. Buck and his wife Blanche had made arrangements to rendezvous with Bonnie and Clyde.
Okay.
He was really intending to go on the straight and narrow. He was going to try to talk Clyde into coming back, and then he got off and got in trouble himself, and then he wasn't nothing he could do.
For 2 weeks, the two couples lived quietly in an apartment in Joplin, Missouri. W.D. Jones, a childhood neighbor and accomplice of Clyde's, was also with the group, but by April 13th, money was running low.
Barrow and W.D. Jones had just come back from a trip out casing new places to burglarize. And Buck had met him at the door, there at the garage door, and Buck was just closing the garage door when the police drove up, and Buck said, "It's the law."
Suspicious neighbors had alerted local police that bootleggers might be hiding in the apartment. When Detective Wes Harriman and Constable Harry McGinnis went to the front door, they had no idea who they were really confronting.
Clyde and W.D. Jones grabbed their shotguns and just met them right there at the door and killed the first two that came up to the door.
Damn!
As quick as that.
And with that, Bonnie grabbed an automatic rifle and started firing out of the kitchen window. Well, from there, the gunfire became widespread. Buck Barrow started firing, other police were firing. W.D. Jones was hit by a round in the head, blood spurted. Bonnie came running down the stairs. Blanche, Buck's wife, ran crazily into the street with her little dog yapping at her heels. Clyde managed to get everybody but Blanche into a car in the garage and flung the doors open, firing shotguns and automatic rifles. They roared out of the garage and down the street, leaving one dead and one dying policeman behind them, and the others firing after them.
Bro, that's like some GTA mission type shit.
This was just one of the many times that Bonnie and Clyde managed to escape justice. But a roll of film the group left behind produced indelible images of the gang. Newspapers printed the sensational photos and reported the group's triumph over the law. The public's sordid interests were piqued. They clamored for more of the astonishing gang story. Any intention Buck had to go straight was finished. The gang's fate was sealed by this heinous crime. The beginning of the end took place in Wellington, Texas on June 8th, 1933, when Bonnie was seriously injured.
Damn, how?
She and Clyde and W.D. Jones were driving out near Wellington, Texas.
This is Wix Studio,
The fuck?
built to meet any brief. When the brief calls for complex structure, let AI
to meet Buck and Blanche in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And they were crossing the Red River, and they were unaware that a bridge was out. And they went off the road into the dry riverbed, and the car tumbled a few times and caught on fire. And Bonnie was burned in the fire there.
No!
Bonnie's leg, all the muscle. She was burned to the bone on her calf of her leg.
Ah.
She never walked any more straight. She walked with a limp, a bad limp. She never got over that. That was one of the time I went to her. Clyde came after me. They were in Arkansas. Billie Jean Parker, 1968.
Bonnie, Clyde, and W.D. fled to Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Arkansas,
where they
okay.
met up with Blanche and Bonnie.
I knew it was Arkansas.
Despite Bonnie's injuries, the gang kept on the move.
Clyde Barrow's driving was what kept him alive for the 2 years. Bonnie and Clyde.
So he was a good driver.
Their name's infamous. He thought nothing of driving 1,000 miles in one stretch. With the no two-way radios and stuff, Clyde Barrow knew that he could escape criminal prosecution by crossing state lines.
The idea that you could conduct a robbery, jump in the car and speed away and actually escape was real. It could be done, because if you got out of sight, you might very well escape.
Finally, in July 1933, the gang settled down in the Red Crown tourist camp in Platte City, Missouri. But the law had been tipped off. The gang was there, and soon the Barrows were completely surrounded.
They had overpowering force. But still, being polite gentlemen, they went up to the cabin door and knocked and asked who was there. And Blanche sort of sweetly said, "I'm not dressed. Just wait a moment." While, of course, Buck and Clyde and Jones armed themselves to the teeth and then commenced blazing away, taking the policemen totally by surprise. They also hit the horn of the armored car that was there, and it set off to roaring through the night, and all the officers thought that it was a signal, so they rushed forward, which exposed themselves, caused utter confusion. They all got in the car, which was soon engulfed in a fuselage of fire from...
Tried to ambush their ass.
Windows were shattered. Blanche got shards of glass in her eyes and began to scream. Buck took a bullet through the brain, which went in one temple and out the other, and wounded into the car. Clyde, machine gun in one hand, driving like a demon, went right through the police lines, and they still made it away.
On July 20th, the crippled gang arrived at an abandoned amusement park near Dexter, Iowa. But after 4 days, police discovered the hideout and moved in on them. Bonnie, Clyde, and W.D. once again managed to escape. The critically injured Buck and Blanche surrendered to authorities. Near death, Buck was hospitalized.
My mother went up there. He lived, I think part of his brains was even shot. I don't know how he talked. It was just so long, you know, that he did. But he was, my mother was there when he died.
Buck Barrow died on July 30th, 1933. Blanche was sent to jail and spent 10 years in prison. W.D. Jones left.
Hold on, this was her?
Sent to jail.
Damn. That's when the glass got in her eye.
And spent 10 years in prison.
10 years.
W.D. Jones left Bonnie and Clyde. Shortly thereafter, police apprehended W.D. After his capture, in order to receive a lighter sentence, Jones renounced his fellow outlaws and claimed he was an unwilling participant when he gave this statement.
Hey, right.
I have been indicted along with Clyde and Bonnie for the murder of Malcolm Davis, Fort Worth Deputy Sheriff.
Well, he did, right?
I was forced along under threats of death with Clyde Barrow through many of his gun battles and saw him kill 5 men. Clyde Barrow never seemed to care for killing anyone. All he thought of was himself. That's the reason I tried to escape. Just soon kill me as anyone.
They got Buddy on tape.
Bonnie and Clyde continued to make headlines. On January 16th, 1934, Clyde kept his promise to Raymond Hamilton and fulfilled his dream. he masterminded a daring breakout at Eastham Prison Farm. Clyde enlisted the help of Hamilton's brother, Floyd. Floyd and an accomplice hid the guns.
That boy brought them out of jail.
The guns are planted on this wood pile, the very wood pile where Ralph Fultz was pistol whipped years earlier. One of the convicts, named Joe Palmer, retrieved the guns. The convicts went out to the fields to work. Joe Palmer had 2 guns on him. He slipped one to Raymond Hamilton. And knowing that Clyde Barrow was parked near these fields, and indeed Clyde Barrow was parked there, Bonnie waited behind the wheel. Clyde went down in this little gully near where these workers were going to work with Browning automatic rifles, and they just wait.
Around 7 a.m., gunfire erupted.
Early in the morning with it.
The 3 remaining guards ran for cover.
Bonnie's blowing the horn because it's so foggy, so they know where the car is, and they all run up to the car, and Barrow gets behind the wheel, and here comes the 4 escaping prisoners, and they dive in.
Hamilton and 4 other prisoners escaped. One of the escapees was Henry.
Clyde a real nigga.
Methvin would prove to be a critical mistake for Bonnie and Clyde.
Wait, what?
Helping Methvin would prove to be a critical mistake for Bonnie and Clyde.
What happened?
After a series of murders and bank jobs, Bonnie and Clyde were boldly keeping a rendezvous with some of their henchmen near Grapevine, Texas.
This 1934 film footage is a recreation of the notorious duo's last 2 murders.
Presently, 2 state highway patrol officers sighted the pair. They decide to investigate.
A couple of Texas Highway Patrolmen from the newly created Texas Highway Patrol came along on their motorcycles, and the end result was 2 dead highway patrolmen.
Damn.
This atrocious murder sealed the doom of Bonnie and Clyde, for every peace officer in the entire Southwest became so enraged over this killing, they pledged themselves to sleepless days and nights in their search for this murdering pair.
Hundreds of law enforcement personnel desperately wanted to catch these criminals and put an end to their reign.
But it was viral.
The most famous was former Texas Ranger Frank Hamer.
Texas Ranger.
It took Hamer 102 days to finally track down Bonnie and Clyde. And what he did, he fell back on his early ranger training, and he set out as sort of a lone wolf just himself to learn as much as he could about them and their habits. He virtually did track them down single-handedly.
We knew he was going to get killed sooner or later, but we just didn't know when. But it really didn't surprise any of us when he did get killed.
Damn.
I prayed only last night that I might see him alive again, just once more. Cumie Barrow, May 23rd, 1934.
But Clyde's mother would not get her wish. On the morning of May 23rd, 1934, an unsuspecting Bonnie and Clyde were driving down a country road near Arcadia, Louisiana, close to Henry Methvin's father's home. Texas Rangers and sheriffs awaited them. It was a carefully planned ambush. Henry Methvin's father had betrayed the pair in exchange for amnesty for his son.
Damn.
For 3 days and nights, these officers lay in wait on this road.
Frank Hamer suspected the weakening criminals would seek the protection of home ground. Returning to Dallas was out of the question. But Bonnie and Clyde had previously sought refuge at the Methvin farm. The officers commandeered Old Man Methvin's truck and jacked it up. Clyde slowed down to help his friend's father.
That looks like the car, fellas.
All you gotta do is...
That's crazy.
You've never used samples like this before.
Let me show you.
So the friend he helped out of jail, his daddy was a rat. A pig.
That's him for sure, I'll guarantee you. Get ready now. That's him, fellas. He's reaching for it. Let him have it. Look out!
This incredible film footage was shot by one of the officers on the scene.
The inevitable end. Retribution. Here is Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker, who died as they lived, by the gun. Bonnie is seen leaning against Clyde. Clyde was a master gunman.
Damn, that was actually them.
Seldom did anyone ever live when Clyde got the first shot.
As accustomed as I am to slaughter of humans, I was sickened at the sight of Bonnie's body nearly torn to pieces with bullets. Frank Hamer, May 23rd, 1934.
Dallas deputies Bob Alcorn and Ted Hinton, who participated in the ambush, later publicly spoke about the event.
Over 2 months ago, each and every officer present at the time of the capture deserves the same credit, as we all did our best. I regret that we couldn't have taken them alive, but that was impossible. I further regret that there was a woman that had to be killed, which couldn't have been helped.
There is not much to say now. It is all over. The ends of law and justice have been served.
Damn.
Scores of people rushed to the small Louisiana town, hoping to catch a glimpse of the dead outlaws. It was a scene of absolute pandemonium.
Yeah, that was hard.
They tried to do everything to him, cut his ears off and tried to do that and everything else just to get pieces of him.
Pieces of him?
People's cruel. They're worse than he was.
There were separate funerals and grave sites for the lovers who in life had been inseparable.
Thousands attend the homecoming of Clyde Barrow.
In this Dallas funeral home, a never-ending line of men, women, and children from every walk of life came to catch a glimpse of the body of the criminal who had wrought so much death and destruction.
Damn.
Clyde's body is borne to the grave. Again, tragedy and shame descend upon his aged father and mother. Like his brother Buck, he died at the hands of the law.
At another funeral home in Dallas, 3 miles across the city from where Clyde's body lay the body of his lover. For Bonnie, the crowd was even larger. There had never been a woman outlaw as notorious as Bonnie, and she was the only woman ever to be shot down by officers of the law in attempted capture.
Bonnie's burial was attended only by close friends and relatives, which numbered about 150 people. Clyde Barrow's mother and father also pay their respects to the girl who was Clyde's only friend and who died by his side.
With the exception of how they were buried, Bonnie accurately predicted what would become of her and Clyde in a poem she penned before their deaths.
She predicted it.
They don't think they're too smart or desperate. They know that the law always wins. They've been shot at before, but they do not ignore that death is the wages of sin. Someday they'll go down together. They'll bury them side by side. To few, it'll be grief. To the law, a relief. But it's death for Bonnie and Clyde.
I ain't gonna lie, that shit was good, bro. That shit was good, bro. That is crazy, bro. Bro, what the fuck? Man. My grandpa had the time, if he 12 kilo, grandpa been underground still. Selling moonshine 50 cents a year. My grandpa, his grandpa and granny fed Bonnie and Clyde and gave them shelter for the night. They gave them $100 bill and said thank you and they left. Man, that shit killed. That is wild, bro. My goodness, bro. Hey man, W story, bro. W story, man.